Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how to remove, service and reinstall a standard cup and cone bottom bracket. I'm going to explain the science behind it as well as I go, in case that's of use or interest to you. But the way it works is you have a standard lock ring, or lock nut if you like, holding this part to a certain torque, because if you do this part up super tight, then it's not going to work. The crank arms, the things that the pedals attached to, just aren't going to go around. So this goes up to a certain torque. I'll explain that when we reinstall, and this goes on super tight to make sure that doesn't move. That's the first thing to remember. The other thing to remember as well is, although this undoes in the standard way, lefty-loosey, anti-clockwise, the other side, the drive side, is the opposite. So actually, while this is spinning like this to undo it, on this side it spins in the same direction. Why? Same direction looking through. Why? Because when you're pedaling, you're going to be undoing it potentially if there's friction over many hundreds or thousands of miles. So the way we have a reverse thread on the drive side is to make sure that we're always making sure things are just tight and as they should be. Okay, so that bit comes off. You then need a special tool. I'll leave a note in the description to show you what that is. Cool. This isn't tight at all. And then this unthreads. Now inside of here, I'm expecting, because this bike hasn't been touched, the customer says, for over 20 years, we're going to find either loose ball bearings or a caged ball bearing system. And I reckon we're going to find no grease at all, because grease does break down over the years. And there we go, that's what we need. So inside of there, it's almost as clean as a whistle. It's not going to take much cleaning, but it just shows how desperate for a service this is, because that's just dry as a bone. You need to have loads of grease packing that out. So I'm going to show you that during the service process. And as for this, well, I'm going to chuck these, although they do look in pretty good nick, but I'm going to replace them with brand new ball bearings of the same size, but not use the cage. That way we'll get more ball bearings in the system, and hopefully it'll be more effective for running smoothly. The only reason you'd use a cage is because it's frankly a lot easier, particularly for the factories when they reinstall them. Now on the other side, I did explain that it's a reverse thread, it's the opposite direction, but actually if things are looking tight, you can leave that well alone and just pull this through. So that is your bottom bracket system. That's your axle. You've got the threads, as I explained a moment ago, with the ball bearings. And inside of here, there we go. There's the cage and a protecting system as well. Really skanky, really gross, loads of dirt and grime in there. But in terms of the other nut on the other side, that can stay where it is actually. I might remove it, I might have a look, but if you're in a rush, if things are looking in good nick, you can actually clean this whole system through this way and leave the nut, which is different, on the opposite side. Well, it's supposed to be a how-to video anyway, so it makes sense to show you, but actually this is looking so gross, I think it makes real sense to get this off and make sure the whole thing is clean. But as I say, if things look good to you, you can be the judge. You can actually leave this side altogether if you want to do a quick service. So once I've done this, I won't be returning to this the next time it needs a service, because I'll be looking after the system and I'll be treating it to a fresh bottom bracket service, I don't know, whenever it needs it, I guess. But this has been devoid of care and love, I know the feeling, for many years. Okay, so that's giving it a good clean. Inside is much to be desired. That's what we're going to be working on. Now, particular tools exist for every job, and this is no exception. So you'll see this part here is oval except for a couple of squared off parts. It fits perfectly with the lock system here, but remember, we're going in a different direction. I've got a water bottle to contend with, which is just in the wrong place. But would you believe that a water bottle is just in the wrong place? I'll have to do it this way around instead. So basically this tool would fit over the end. It's a real cute and tight fit, and once it's on, you would undo, remember, the opposite way around. So we'd pull up like this, there we go, and that's at a different angle now, so I can get on the other side, and this is how you would undo it. There we go. So once this part is out, you can give the threads a good clean, which we're going to do during the service part, and we can give this a good clean as well. So again, if you're doing a standard service of the bottom bracket and you know the bike is in good shape and has been pretty well looked after, you could probably get away with leaving this where it is. But hey, now you know how to do it. Using a degreasing formula, brake cleaner honestly can do a really good job. Just make sure that your paint won't come off. Brake cleaner is not the nicest, but paint usually is quite hardy on bikes, particularly actually the older you go. Much like with cars, the older paint systems are way more robust and hard wearing than a lot of modern cars. You have access to a wire brush. Now is a good time to put it to work. Again, you don't want to scratch the paint, but you really want to get stuck in here and just make sure all the threads haven't been contaminated with bits of grit, grime and anything else, because when you put this thing back on, the threads are pretty hardy, they're well made, but you don't want to cross thread or introduce a piece of grit into the system, because that could damage the threads and then you really are stuffed. You'll have to get the whole thread system chased, which isn't the end of the world, but it's an expense you don't want to part with, particularly if you're meant to be servicing it without the help of a bike shop. Now it's time for the cleaning of the cup and cone system itself. As I said earlier on, it's not that grubby actually, but you might want a bit of help from some more degreaser. But you want to make sure this is as clean as possible. Now inside, if the ball bearings were really worn down, they would then actually wear the inside, this part of the cup. But as it happens, things are just right. So we've got to make sure the outside is nice and clean as well. You can use your stiff wire brush to get between the threads if you need to. But there is, I think, a pretty good job. This could do with a bit of a clean as well. So I'll do that off camera before it gets reinstalled, but that's more superficial than anything else. Okay, so what we need to do is to get your grease inside here. This is bike grease, and I'd recommend using this sort of grease rather than multi-purpose. And then, unless you've got a steady hand, you can use maybe the tip of a screwdriver to pop these in, because these are magnetic. So if the end of your screwdriver has a magnetic tip, then you can actually do that as well. I've got rather small fingers, so I tend to be able to just do that without it. Anyway, when it goes into the grease, you'll see two things. The first is that the grease tends to hold the ball bearings in place. Once these are in, I'm going to pack it in with more grease. But the other thing you'll notice is how many more ball bearings you can get in. On this one here, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think you've got 8 or 9. You're going to get way more in there. And that just enables things to run even more smoothly and freely than before, and enable, I think, a more thorough, clever system. So if you want the job done properly and to work well, then do it properly first time. Okay, more grease on top. And that is ready for going in. Now the way this works, if you didn't know, this is the science part I was talking about. You've got the cone part, the cup part, and once this is clean, which it will be in a minute, this is going to go through, and this part here, which is slightly rounded, is going to meet with the ball bearings on one side, and the other side of the ball bearings obviously is going to meet in the cup of here, and that's how the two are going to glide perfectly. But all of this grit, which hopefully you can see on camera, is going to prevent everything running smoothly. So that has got to be cleaned up. Don't cut corners, don't do a cheap job. You've got this far, you might as well do a good job to finish. Now most of this is coming off already, which is brilliant, but I'm going to get some degreaser on it as well, just to make sure this part comes off. Now these axles, actually, they're pretty easy to come by, but I like to reuse and recycle as much as possible. So yeah, the grime's starting to come off. So I'm going to stop the camera just so I don't bore you to tears, but you can see this is already coming up. So off camera, I'll clean this up properly and then we'll resume in a moment. Well, that is about as clean as I'm going to get it now, so I can show you how it works. With all the gunk off, this will go into here, and it's got a perfectly smooth running now, and that is just what we need. So that's going to happen that side, and then on the reverse, With this one, it's going to be exactly the same principle. So again, I'll do that off camera to save your boredom, and then it will be a case of reinstalling. Should have mentioned before, if you were eagle-eyed, that with this cage, there was also a plastic ring which the cage itself would fit into. We're going to do away with the cage, so I'm also going to do away with this. It won't be needed. It's purely a way of holding things in place at the point of putting everything together in the factory all those years ago. It serves no purpose, I guarantee it. So one less thing in the system to get clogged up and caught up, the better. It's essentially a dust protector, but because we're now going loose, honestly, it is not needed. So there we go. And now it's time to reinstall. When you do, make sure that you put things the right way around, because remember, we've got different threads on both sides. So this is the side that didn't need to come off had the bike been better looked after. And remember, we're going the opposite way round to what you'd expect. But that is moving in really, really smoothly, which just shows how clean the threads now are. So this is going in anti-clockwise. Now remember the tool we had before. We're going to use the same tool again to tighten. And we're not going to go crazy, but we're going to tighten it up enough that things are going to stay in place. Now, I know that these ball bearings are going to stay where they are because they're so well packed in with the grease, but you definitely don't want them to come out at this point, otherwise it will be quite fiddly sorting them all out. Now you remember from before, with the axle, we're going to push it through this side, and if you're really cute about it and go straight through the middle without disturbing the ball bearings, there we go, it'll be perfectly in place. I'll just take this out though and remind you of one thing. Sometimes these are different lengths, so it's always worth making a note of which end you're removing first, because sometimes one side is shorter than the other. Anyway, this is equal on both sides, so we're in business. In it goes, nice and smooth. And now I'll turn the bike around and we'll do the other side. So the cup on the other side has received the same treatment. It's been nicely cleaned and the ball bearings have been well packed in. We just need to make sure we don't disturb the ball bearings as we meet one to the other. Now remember, this side is standard thread. If you think it's resisting, it probably is. So back up. If you hear a bit of a click like that, perfect for the camera that was, then it means the threads are then aligning themselves, and you can go ahead and tighten. Now I remember do you remember I said before about the lock nut, the lock ring holding this in place? Don't tighten this super tight. This side needs to be tight. This side needs to be done by adjustment, and really it is trial and error by feel. As it is at the moment, I think this is perfect because there's no wiggle at all. If I was to move this backwards and forwards, which I'm trying to, there's no play at all. So I think actually I've gauged it just right. But as you put the lock ring on, you will know how it needs to be. So once this is tightened to allow just enough play but not too much, you can then put the lock nut on. This is the best I could get for cleaning it, unfortunately, so I may well replace it at some other point to make it look a bit nicer, because it really looks out of place to this now. But this is the tough bit. You've got to tighten this without moving this. And if I show you with this tool, as I tighten it, you've really got to nip it up and then some. It might be that this inner part starts to move. So I'm just going to, for the purpose of the video, I'm just going to show you how it works. There you go, it just starts to move. Well, that amount of movement, just a millimetre or two, could be all the difference between the right amount of bite and the wrong amount of bite. Now, to me, that feels just about right. So using the tool I used to remove this inner part, I'm going to put that on there again, and I'm just going to hold it in place while turning this part clockwise. So we're going to hold the inner in place on my left hand, and the right hand, there we go. I'm just going to tighten up. There we go. That was the bike stand creaking, not my arms, in case you're wondering. That, oh my gosh, is just about right. It might need a bit of tweaking, might need a bit of adjustment, but hey, you know how to do it now. Job done. And there you go. You can now remove, service and reinstall your cup and cone bottom bracket. As ever, I'd really love it if you could subscribe to the channel, do like the video, and please add a comment for anything else you'd like me to work on, particularly other types of bottom bracket. But there we are. You know now how to do it. Just get yourself a few tools, which I'll put in the description, and you'll never need to go to a bike shop again. As ever, thanks for watching. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.